Punjab Kings, arguably one of the weirder teams from the 2020 version of the IPL. They were notoriously slow starters, both in their innings and across the competition as a whole. They came strong towards the back end, ended up finishing sixth, just massively inconsistent. I guess they've had quite a good auction. They've been quite busy. Obviously, they had a lot of money to spend. How do you think they spent that money?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit there. They had a lot of money to spend. I think they did it fairly well. I would grade them about 7 out of 10 auction, which is better than I would grade most teams. So that's progress for sure. Last year, they conceded the highest boundary percent in the entire tournament, which is an insurmountable hurdle that needs to be addressed in terms of longer term success. Very similar dynamic to Rajasthan overall, and decent batters in terms of the hitters, but lacked decent bowling options. I think they've done some surgery on that issue, bringing in Jai Richardson, who also will help them alleviate the problem, which was a disastrous problem, in my opinion, of having someone like Jordan or Majib at 7, which is just mind blowing that you've got 80 crore to spend on a squad and you end up with that. No. Now the other issues that they have is that Agarwal, Gale, and Paran are really they're only 3 really good spin hitters. So Kyle Rahul struggled against spin last year. He famously said strike rate doesn't matter. And it does matter. That's his output will be key for them. If he might well win the cap for being the scoring the most runs, but if he does it at a strike rate of 120, it's no good to anyone. So a little bit more intent from him needed as well. The old KL Rahul would be much more preferable. Have they done enough surgery on the bowling group, really, is the number one question. And it depends how they structure up with their overseas. So I don't understand the signings of Moises Henriques or David Malan, really, to be honest with you. Henriques, I just don't see. I mean, obviously, to get to 4.2 crore, you need to have more than one bidder. And I just didn't see the logic as to why he was bid up so high. And Milan, I just don't see him complementing their batting group. I don't see how he plays in this team, and I don't see how he adds value to this team. That's not saying he's a bad player. I just think that if you look at the way that some of their batters already approach their innings, so Rahul and Gale already like to spend quite a bit of time building in innings.
Getting in,
yeah. So then another one who does that as well. So it's not. I'm saying it's not. Oh, he's a bad player. I just don't think he suits their team. I think that's a bad team for him to have to join. I don't think he's the right player for them. And again, they missed out on an elite leg spinner, so they're going to really have to hope that Bishnoi continues his development. And they really needed an aggressive hitter as an all-rounder. So Fabian Allen kind of ticks that box, although his bowling output isn't massive. So maybe they might look to play him a little more, maybe like a 7. They also have like a couple of domestic players who I'm really not convinced about from like a hitting perspective, Mandeep Singh and Deepak Hooda. And it'd be interesting to see how they deal with those 2 players, whether they actually pick Shahrukh Khan and perhaps Imran Singh instead, and look to give those sort of less exposed players with a lot more upside their opportunities as well. So I also like Ishan Perel as a pace bowler. He's done very, very well inside Mushtaq Ali Trophy in the last couple of years. I actually wrote about him in my book as a player with high potential. So I'd like to see him get good amount of game time as well. Punjab Kings, if they structure up how I think they should structure up, I actually would consider them to be quite dark horses for this tournament. But they could also pick a really bad team as well. And a lot will depend on their strategy. But if in my opinion, if they nail their strategy, I actually think they could come top 3. So it's all about how they structure up the overseas combos are going to be key. How they managed to reduce their bowling boundary percentage conceded is massive as well. How they look to structure up the pace bowling group, having that death bowling role clarity as well is massive. They had those issues last year. They need to address them. It's as simple as that. But could they address them? Yes. Will they address them? Well, let's wait and see.
That strategy you've got in mind, is that one that includes Fabian Allen, or is it one that includes Riley Meredith with Jai Richardson?
Look, that's an interesting question. The problem is that they've got a fairly fixed top four, in my opinion, of Agarwal, Rahul, Gale and Paran.
Yeah.
But that includes 2 overseas, right? And then you've got probably 2 locals at 5 and 6 in all logical sense. 2 of Mandeep Singh, Deepak Hooda, Prabhsimran Singh or Shahrukh Khan. Okay? Then the 7 is the key spot for them. 7's a spot too high for Jai, unless they can consistently bat deep and he comes in, say, 16 overs. That we saw last year, they had that massive problem with depth, and that is a huge hurdle to have to overcome because it stops your top order playing a lot more risk-free and it constrains your top batsman a lot more. So I don't like that tail started at 7 move. And yeah, it would be a fair point to suggest that a number 7 doesn't face that many balls on average. But having a half-decent number 7 does allow your top order to go heavier, go quicker, more aggressive to start with. Allen, yeah, I think at some venues in particular, he would look like a good pick. Whether he gets picked up or used much is another matter entirely. And that's why I said that they really needed an aggressive hitter as an all-rounder. Someone like, I don't know, Morris might have been quite good for them.
Yeah, they bid quite high for him, didn't they, with Morris? Yeah. They went all the way.
I think Punjab Kings had the biggest purse in advance of the auction, so presumably they would have had the funds at that point. I think Morris went before Jai as well, which could they have got both? I don't know. But they could have also bought Ben Cutting for not a lot as well.
Nothing,
and other players like Lewis Gregory went unsold. All players who kind of fit that bracket of maybe, I don't know how to describe it, a good finisher, a good pace finisher, and someone who you can maybe get 2 overs out of in the middle overs. And if you can get regularly get 2 overs, 0 for 16, 2 overs, 1 for 17 kind of figures out of them in the middle, and then they hit 200, 180, 200 strike rate at the death in 10 balls against pace, so they've done their job. So I think they could have maybe missed a trick by ignoring those type of players and then getting Henriquez instead, who doesn't have high boundary numbers and has negligible bowling output these days.
Yeah, I see a couple of people being massive for them. One of whom, obviously, Nicholas Pooran, who's developed into a bit of a freak. His spin hitting, his just general hitting is out of this world. His strike rate and his intent, he's definitely a good one to complement. If Ravel's going slowly at the start, he's definitely one to look for. He can catch up, yeah. And certainly Mohammed Shami as well, with the top and tail roll. He needs to get his Yorkers back at the death, or just his death bowling in general, not necessarily Yorkers. But he's one that's important as a domestic pacer for them. He plays an important role alongside Richardson and or Meredith.
I'm not Shami's biggest fan actually in T20. So I'm just bringing up some numbers from him now actually as it goes, and his IPL economy rate in the last 4 overs is over 11.
I take it all back. I was wrong.
That's I'm talking about. Sorry, I should clarify that from 2019 onwards. So the last 2 seasons. That's not good. And in the power play, he's struck at almost 34 balls per wicket. So where do you get multi-phase output out of a guy like that? His middle overs numbers are decent, but you don't pick a pace bowler to bowl solely middle overs, and that's where he's bowled the least as well in terms of output. So actually, I'm not convinced by the love for Mohammed Shami, and I think he's fairly overrated based on the numbers that I'll look for. And it'll be interesting to see how he continues in the next couple of years, because he's 31, just turned 31 recently, and pace bowlers tend to have reasonable decline in sort of in the early 30s as well. So interesting to see how his career plays out in the next few years.
It's interesting now. It's like what we were saying earlier, Tom, isn't it? You put people on a pedestal, you have some idea of their pedigree, and then you look at the numbers and it's completely wrong.
I guess it's almost like that kind of thing. You know, where people said at the start of T20, it was almost like at the start of the last World Cup cycle, like with England, you saw kind of rewarding test players with one day and T20 selection. So it always seems like that. You think, oh, he's a good test bowler, he'll be fine in T20. But obviously, the numbers are saying absolutely not.
Yeah. We saw CSK did that with Jara as well as a test player.
Oh, yeah. God, how he's got a contract, I'll never know. Similar to Shami, then Chris Jordan's a little bit of a similar player. It is in an ideal world he won't be playing this year, given the players the personnel they've brought in. But he's a similar one in terms of his death bowling. You know, he's was held in quite high regard, and then we saw over the last series against India, went all over the place for 13s, 14s at the death. Pretty similar in terms of numbers.
Yeah, not someone who the numbers really back up either. Great fielder though. Probably there's not going to be many better fielders in the tournament, but unfortunately that's probably not going to make up for, I think, the bowling output, in my opinion. And I think that his batting was a little bit overrated as well, because his boundary percentage is below average, and certainly below average for the role that he's often used in.
So your verdict for Punjab Kings was what? Top 3 dark horses?
If they structure it well. So if they pick Gale, Paran and Richardson as 3 key overseas on a regular basis, and then make some smart domestic picks as well. But it all depends. Like they make bad pick. This is a complete polarized squad. You've got an 11 who you could pick who would be really good, or could be really good. But you've also got sort of 4 players maybe in that, you would say. The top 4 maybe Shami, you would say, probably guaranteed to play pretty much all the time. But based on what the management will probably do, at least. So you've got sort of 6-ish other players who may or may not play, and who they pick as those other 6 players is the real key for me. If they pick a few bad players, they can come bottom. And that's the fine margins, right? Because like I said earlier, so 1 or 2 wins is often the difference between coming 8th and 3rd.
Yeah, but it'd be fascinating to see what they end up going for. I like your call of them being a dark horse, but obviously a lot of it does depend on sensibility and picking the right teams.